Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. A lot of people ask me the question, can they change the bar size on their saw? The answer is yes and no, so we'll go over that. But first of all, if you own a steel chain, there are three different mounting configurations. And the mounting configuration is not interchangeable with a lot of other brands, especially Husqvarna. They're totally different. They're a lot smaller. So the configuration consists of the two holes, the spacing, as well as the slot, and how wide the slot is. On this still small 043 gauge bar, which is typically your small chainsaw MS-180, MS-181, 043 gauge, so that's the size of the drive link and the slot that's in the bar, and 043 gauge has a drive link thickness of 1.1 millimeters. Or 43 thousandths of an inch. So the small bar mount has a number, and that's 3005, and it has a 8.2 millimeter slot. A medium bar mount is 3003 and has a 12.1 millimeter slot. And the largest one in the steel range is a 3002 and has a 14 millimeter slot. So that's your three different bar mounts. And there is an adapter. Now the Husqvarna are smaller, so you can get an adapter, Husqvarna adapter, and if you look up in the top left hand corner you can see this Husqvarna adapter that you can put into your steel bar, and if you do that it will fit on a Husky, so you can use the Husky adapter to fit in the steel bars. So yeah. Now, okay, onto the chains. Now, the chains are denoted by what we call pitch, and the pitch of a chain is determined by measuring any three rivets and dividing them by 2. And that's the way that that works. Now, there are 5 different chain sizes, or really there's 4, but there's a total of 6 different chains, because if we start off with the smallest chain that you can buy, which is this one here, right up at the top, it's 1/4 inch Pico. It's 043 gauge, so the drive link is 1.1 millimeter. Pico meaning that it's a little bit smaller than the standard 1/4 inch, and it's used on little handheld chainsaws. So the next size up is your standard 1/4 inch, which I don't have here, so I don't use 1/4 inch. And it's exactly the same thing, 043 gauge, 1.1 millimeters. The next chain is still the same gauge, 043 gauge, 1.1 millimeters, but it's 3/8 low profile. The next chain is 0.325. 0.325 has a gauge width of 1.3 millimeters, 1.5 millimeters, and 1.6. So to put that into thou, you've got 50 thou, 58 thou, and 63 thou. It is the only chain gauge that has 3 different gauge widths. So yeah, very versatile, that one, used by a lot of the professionals. Now the most common chain worldwide would be your standard 3/8. So that's that one there, and it's got a gauge of 063, and the drive link is 1.6 millimeters in width. Then we go to the last one, which is 404 chain, which is 063 gauge again, and that's 1.6 millimeters in width. So that's that, and then you've got the files for the chains. So when we look at the 1/4 inch Pico, it takes a 3.2 millimeter file, or a 1/8 in imperial size. Your 3/8 low profile takes a 4 millimeter file, which is a 532, and your 0.325 takes a 4.8 millimeter file, which is 3/16. Now your 3/8 chain can either take a 5.2 millimeter file, which is 13/64, or it can take a 5.5 millimeter file, which is 732. It depends on the chain manufacturer as to which file they recommend. Still recommend a 5.2mm file, which is a 1364. Now, we spoke about those bar mounts and how they were interchangeable. If you use that Husqvarna adapter, you'd have to get on eBay or something. It's not something that they sell down at the local shops. So, yeah, it may be a little bit difficult to source that. So it brings me back to the other point of what sort of... now, before I get in... Yeah, hang on, I'm jumping the gun. When we spoke about all these different sizes of chains, one thing that actually changes a lot with them is the width of the tooth. Now, when we talk about the width of the tooth, it's referred to as kerf. So this is referred to as the kerf because it creates a slot in the tooth. A slot in the wood. Yeah, so the tooth creates a slot as it saws into the timber. And that's referred to a kerf. And obviously, the smaller chain has a smaller kerf and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you remember before, we spoke about the .325, and it comes in 3 different kerfs. So I wrote down the width of 1/4 inch picot. The width of the kerf is 2.7mm wide. I don't have a standard 1/4 inch picot. It's probably around 3mm. But a 3/8 low profile is 3.7mm wide. Now, a .325 obviously comes in 50 thou, 58 thou, and 63 thou. And I don't have I've never measured the 50 thou or the 58 thou because I don't have them. I've only got the 063 gauge. And that's 4.1mm in width. Now, a 3/8 chain is 4.5mm in width, and a 404 is 5mm in width. So you can see that as you go up in chain size, and it's not just the width or the kerf of the tooth that goes up, the actual thickness of the drive link changes, the thickness of the tie strap is thinner. Like an example, on a 3/8 chain, it was about 1.4mm in width. That was the standard tie strap. And on a 3/8 low profile, it was 1.1mm in width. Now, when I actually weighed the 3/8 low profile tie strap, it weighed 0.6 of a gram, and the 3/8 standard, which was 1.4mm in width, weighed 0.9 of a gram. So you can see that the weight of the chain can significantly change in weight based on its gauge. And that's what they try and do with a lot of the chainsaw chains. So if we're talking about a little chainsaw up to about, say, 40 cc's, you can run up to a 16-inch bar and it'll be 043 gauge, most likely, or 050 gauge. Now, we spoke about .235. .325 was sort of mainly used by professionals, and the reason being, it's a versatile thinner chain. It's in between 3/8 low profile and 3/8 standard, but it comes in your 3 different gauges, and it's from, you can get a bar from 16 inches, 18 inches, and 20 inches. So that's the difference there. Now, arborists mainly use .325. A lot of the arborist saws that they sell, especially the MS261, they come standard with .325 bars on them. You could select whether you want 50 thou gauge, 58, and you probably wouldn't use 063 gauge unless you're probably running a 20-inch bar. So that's up to you whether you want to, which way you want to go. And it depends what sort of wood that you cut in and what sort of the job is. So, but you have that variation in that .325. Because the smaller the chain, the less horsepower required to pull it. Because the smaller the gauge, the smaller the tooth, as we mentioned before. everything is smaller when you talk, as soon as you say low profile or pico or micro, you're talking about smaller. So when we say 3/8 standard, yeah, it's much, much bigger than the pico versions. So that's the way that works. So in your small cc range from 30 to 40 cc's, you're only going to be running, say, 1/4 inch or 3/8 low profile. That's it. And you're only going to run up to, say, a 16-inch bar. On your 0.325, they go up to about 45 cc's, and you'd be running 16 to 20 inch. 3 sizes, 16, 18 and 20. That's it. So that's your variation there. So there's a little bit there. As soon as you get into your 50cc and your 60cc range, you're into your 3/8 chain. Now your 3/8 chain has got a 1 gauge only, which is 1.6 millimeters. So 063, 63 thou is 1.6 mil, and that is through the entire range, whether you've got a 36-inch bar on it or whether you've got a 20-inch bar on it. So the other thing that is changeable is different sprockets from a 7-tooth to an 8-tooth. So that's another thing. If you've got a professional saw and it has a floating sprocket, you can change that. But if you go up to an 8-tooth sprocket, you would normally not do that on a small saw. You would only ever do it on a big saw with a smaller bar. So an example of that would be if you were to buy a MS500i, it would come standard with a 25-inch bar or a 20-inch bar, but you can put a 36-inch bar on that. So if you were running a 20-inch bar, you could put an 8-tooth sprocket on that and you get higher chain speed, and that will handle that quite well. But you don't want to leave that sprocket on there, the 8-tooth sprocket, if you were doing a 36-inch bar. You would want your 7-tooth sprocket. Now, 36 inches is the maximum that you're ever going to put on a 500i. And it'll pull a 36-inch bar, but in real hardwood, you might want to run a skip tooth. So, a lot of people that run big bars run skip chains. And that would be in the case of whether you've got an MS660, an MS661, or an MS880, which can run up to huge bars. 59 inches, I think, is the longest steel bar that you can buy these days. So, and let me assure you that if you're going to go out and buy, you know, really big long bars, you need to be a professional. Those things aren't toys. You really got to know what you're doing, and that takes lots and lots of experience. I mean, imagine a 59-inch bar. What sort of tree are you going to cut down with that, or are you going to use it for milling? If you're going to use it for milling, then the profile of the tooth is going to be different. And that brings us to another point about all these different chain sizes. You've got semi-chisel, which is probably 99% of the times what most people use, or you've got full chisel. So you've got a selection of different chains, full chisel, semi-chisel. You've got hexa. That's a hexagonal profile on the side plate, and it runs a narrower kerf. And that's the other thing. You can get narrower kerf chains for, especially still make the hexa. Now, the difference in that is, we mentioned before that a standard 3/8 chain has a kerf of 4.5 millimeters. When we run the hexa, the width of the tooth is reduced down to 4.1 millimeters across here, the widest point. And that gets through the timber a little bit easier. And with the hexagonal profile on there, hexa is the fastest cut-in chain except for square ground. Won't go into square ground. Square ground is a lot difficult more to hand file than round filing. So, with all those chain sizes that you've got there, yes, in the bigger saws, you've got a lot of choices as to what bar that you run, the length, and the width, the gauge. And as I said, in the 0.325, it's a medium type range. So 16 inches to 20 inches, that can be fantastic for cutting down a smaller trees. 20-inch bars pretty good, because the moment you start lugging 25-inch and 30-inch and 36-inch bars, that saw, you're going to require a fairly decent size saw like the MS500i or the MS660. It's going to get heavy using that, I can tell you right now. It's not the type of saw you want to be carrying around all day and lifting up and cutting. You're going to get tired very easily. So what a lot of the professionals do, they want the most powerful saw with the least weight. And that's where the MS261 comes in. And then they jump into the MS400 range. And now I think the MS460 is probably regarded as one of the best professional saws out there, and the MS500i. So it depends on what you want out of a saw as to what bar and gauge that you can put on that saw. So there, as I said, they're all the there's some of the options, or most of the options I've presented to you. That's up to you as to which way you want to go. So normally, there's no such thing as buying one saw out there that's going to do all. The latest saw that I just brought was the MS500i. That's no good for cutting small limbs. That's too heavy, and certainly no good putting a big bar on there to trim up branches. That's why I brought an MS170. Very, very lightweight saw. And even a lot of the battery saws these days in the Stihl range. Very, very powerful little saws. But you need, obviously, a couple of batteries. But they're not really heavy, so you can use them all day long. And that's probably what I like about saws. It's all right to have a powerful saw. If there's a big, huge log on the ground, you've got no choice. You're going to have a big saw to cut through that. But you're certainly not going to use that to cut up firewood. So, yeah, I guess it comes down to, it depends what you want to do. And most professional people who do use chainsaws are going to have at least 3 or 4 different saws for the different jobs that are required. So I hope I've really explained that with all the different chain sizes, because there are quite a few different chain sizes out there and a few different gauges of them as well. So thanks for watching. Bye for now.